So we have a confirmation with a second opinion that he definitely has prostate cancer.
Welcome to our second episode. I'm Reggie Hicks, producer of the documentary and community engagement project, If You Are My Brothers, and also the host of this podcast, the If You Are My Brothers podcast. Welcome to this very special couples edition of the podcast titled, thanks to our producer, Danny, A Couple's Perspective. No man is an island. And before we get started, a little housekeeping. I want you to remember, we are not a substitute for your medical team. Opinions expressed and medical issues discussed on this podcast are not meant as a substitute for any medical treatment. For this, please consult your health care provider. Okay, got that out the way. And one more thing. Some of what we discuss on this episode will be of a mature nature, so I want to make sure you listen accordingly. You know, this is a very important episode, particularly for me, and it's one that, we as men shy away from. But I'm here to tell you, having honest, transparent conversations with your spouse or significant other is really more than half the battle of getting through this thing called prostate cancer. Trust me, this podcast is designed for two. And I'm sure you guessed by now that my very special guest for this episode is my wife, Anita. She has been my rock through my prostate cancer journey. I can't tell you how much she's been there for me. So men, set aside the ego. And as my wife likes to say, it's life over libido. I like that. So we're here for your questions. So don't be shy because this is real life. And remember to please like, share, subscribe. Join us as we take this journey together. Now, you might be wondering, why am I doing this podcast? And who is this guy? And what is he doing here? For those of you who don't know, some years ago, my fraternity brother, Ralph Franklin, had sent an email to all the fraternity brothers that he knew saying that he had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. Now, for those of you who've had prostate cancer, for those of you who may be going or starting this journey, you know that important number is the PSA. So for Ralph, when he found out he had prostate cancer, his PSA was actually 100. Now, many of us know that as you get older, it goes up, but you want it around 1 or below 1 or 3 or 4. His was 100. He reached out because the prognosis was not very good. He said that he had about 18 months to live. And as a result, I came to him because he was so transparent by letting us all know and wanted to know if he would be willing to chronicle his journey. And he agreed. I'm happy to report that the 18 months after getting a second opinion, he was able to live a lot longer than that. And also, during the course of my chronicling Ralph's story, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, that just goes to show you the odds, particularly among African-American men. It is, some say 1 in 4, 1 in 5. Let's just face it, odds are not in our favor. And in this case, doing this documentary, now I became a part of the journey. And so we have the documentary now, and it's a part of our community engagement efforts. And we're also reworking the documentary to update it because there's so many more things that have happened, particularly in my journey over the last couple of years. Let me just say this about this particular episode. We're going to be talking, Anita and I, about this from my perspective in that I decided as a treatment option to have the prostate removed. Now, there are other treatment options, and future episodes we'll be talking about that. But I didn't have hormone therapy, and that brings a whole lot of other issues. For those of you who are watching this, man, having this hormone therapy, I know because Ralph went through it. I know others that have. It really is something else, and it does almost change you in a way. But we're going to look at it from the perspective of mine being removed, and also to talk a little bit about what happened to me. And I mentioned this on the last episode, where after 12 years of being cancer-free, I, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, was diagnosed with a recurrence of prostate cancer. So we're going to talk a little bit about my treatment as it pertains to that going forward and kind of how that affects us as a family as well. So just wanted to give you that perspective. Anita and I have been married for 25 years. We are getting ready to celebrate our 26th anniversary. I hope I got that number right. But in September, we we'll be celebrating 26 years, and possibly in September, we'll be celebrating our new granddaughter. So we're all excited. September is going to be a big month. Without further ado, let me bring in my significant other, my rock, my love, Anita. Hello, Anita.
Hello, Reggie.
Welcome to the very second episode of If You Are My Brother's podcast. And I know we've been kind of talking about this for a couple of days, though I will say we didn't really have time to go with questions. So this will be like, starting out kind of new for you. Before we get started, you want to just tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Because I already know.
Well, I work in a certain segment of healthcare. I'm a licensed mastered social worker. I have been with Reggie 27, 8 some odd years, 29 years, I'm not sure.
But now let's just make sure that the number of years we've been married is correct. I said 25, going on 26.
Okay, the number of years we've been married is correct. We have been married for 25 years. This year we will celebrate our 26th wedding anniversary.
All right. Well, let's just dive right into it. And so, what was your initial reaction to my diagnosis? And what were your first thoughts and feelings? And I will preface this by saying we got some of that on camera because we were filming when that announcement was made, which you just saw at the beginning of the show. We opened the show with it. But I never really asked you about what was going through your mind.
Well, it's been a number of years, but if I remember correctly, I'd have to say fear was one of the emotions. Uncertainty. I guess I was disappointed in you having received the positive diagnosis. Just a whole gamut of emotions, probably more worrying about what that meant and what the future would hold and how that would change you physically. I would say us as a couple, just what that whole diagnosis would mean.
Yeah, did you feel like our life would change as a result of that?
I wasn't sure how it would change, but I did feel as though it would change in some ways. I did. I knew that it would change. I just wasn't sure how it would change or what it all meant.
And you talk about your fears. I guess your biggest fear was that this just wasn't going to work, huh? That I wouldn't be here.
That was my biggest fear, was would it mean that you would no longer be here? Was it a diagnosis that would end in death? Would it be slow and painful? Just all of the negative things that you feel about cancer. Receiving that diagnosis, those things were running through my mind. How would I do life without you?
Yeah. That's I think that's for a lot of spouses, significant others, and for us going through this, that's the kind of main thing. And I want to say that, a lot of times we as men, we know there may be something going on and we don't want to address it because we don't want bad news. The problem is if you let it go, particularly with prostate cancer, if it's inside the prostate, the success rate is really, really high. It's when you leave it alone and it gets outside of the prostate. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. That's when it can get dangerous and metastasize. So don't put it off. Getting a biopsy is important. And we went through that process, right? I mean, because for us, there was an indication with the PSA going up, but I had like a biopsy and the doctor walks in the door. We have it on camera. I knew what was coming because the doctor had his handful of stuff in his, and I'm like, okay, he didn't have just a sheet of paper. So I knew the process because I've been following Ralph. But for those minutes before he made that declaration, I mean, what was going through your mind?
Well, I was very nervous. I didn't know what to expect until he said the words. And as seen on camera, when he did make the declaration, it caught me, I won't say totally off guard because I had tried to prepare myself, but you never really prepared for that kind of news. I was prepared in the sense that I had made up my mind that I was committed to whatever we had to do or go through in order for you to have a longer, full life, whatever I could do or contribute to enhance your recovery or make sure that you fared well with this diagnosis, I had already committed. In myself, I made the decision that, if I got to cook different, if I got to, whatever I've got to do to make sure you do well in dealing with the cancer, I had already decided to do. But when the words were spoken, I can't say that I was emotionally prepared. I thought I was, but in reality, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. It really did.
So at the onset of my diagnosis, what were the initial steps did you remember that we took? Did you wish we could have done something different once we got kind of started in this thing?
Well, the steps I remember us taking had to do with a lot of research, if that's what you mean. A lot of researching different treatment options and traveling around and seeing what was available and just thoroughly vetting where technology was at that time for treating, your prostate cancer. And I would have to say I wouldn't have done anything any different looking back. I'm happy that you took the time and the effort and the energy to do the research. And I suggest that anybody who receives a diagnosis get other opinions, do the research to see what you can do and what's available, and not just take what one physician says or suggests as the decision that you ought to make. You have to try things on and consider different things and consider your lifestyle and what are the things that are important. We did that. What was important to us before you made a decision? And I know I can't think of anything that we would have done differently.
When I got diagnosed, and I think there was a time when we didn't really tell a lot of people, kind of our inner circle. But did you think that having this was some kind of stigma, or did you feel like our small circle, we don't have a large circle of friends, but did you feel
No,
like there
I
was
was
some,
about to say.
did you feel like there, that people were kind of like, oh no, or that it affected our shared social lives?
I don't think I consider that because of what you just said. As an individual, I have a very, very small circle. And in my small circle, I told everybody. And I never once thought about what other people would think of me sharing that information. I didn't think we'd be pariah or anybody would say, oh no, we can't deal with those Hickses. They got issues. No, that thought never crossed my mind. And as I said earlier, simply because I have a very small circle, and as a couple, socially, we really have a small circle. So no, that thought never crossed my mind. Although I can understand how other people who live a broader social life, how that could be a consideration for whether or not to share the news. But I never once considered, are people going to feel sorry for us? Are they not going to want to hang out with us? What are they going to think? That thought never crossed my mind, but I can certainly understand how it might cross some people's minds. Yes. Prostate cancer is a private, people say it's a private thing. Probably because I'm a social worker, I feel that the more people discuss and share burdens, the better it is, for them, and the better it is for being able to help and impact the people whose lives you touch at large. So I've not been an advocate for keeping things under wraps when it comes to information that may be helpful to other people. That's just me.
Yeah, and I think too that women talk and men don't. And I remember we were there and I was getting a second biopsy, and there was a lady there and she was willing to talk to us about kind of what her husband was going through and what she was going through. And I remember the husband looking, he was, he didn't say nothing. He looked at her like, what are you telling these people about me? And literally, remember, they got up and kind of walked out of the waiting room. You remember that?
I don't remember the specific couple, and I don't remember culturally what our differences may have been, but I do know that it is common in our culture, in our race, for men to be a little more guarded about an issue such as prostate cancer. I mean, there's so much stigma that surrounds sexuality and the thoughts of that. You know, I can understand why men would be less willing to talk about it than women.
Yeah, that's how we are. But I'm just telling you, man, that you watch this, be open as you can. It's a thing, but I can tell you, talking to your significant other, talking to other men who have gone through, I can't tell you how many times that once I acknowledged that I had it and it was going through it, and then you got, oh yeah, well, my brother-in-law. And then it was like, oh yeah, well, back 5 years ago, I had my prostate removed. And I'm like, and it's just interesting how, and again, even after I said I was going through it, a lot of men didn't share until I got deep into it. And I was like, I had no problem telling them what I was going through. And they was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I need to chime in too. So did you feel like there were anybody judging you or judging me once they found out what was going on or anything like that?
I don't. And I guess that relates back to your earlier question, because we have a very small circle and the circle's made up of people who know and love us. And that was not an issue for me. No.
Yeah, well, I guess this next question is something that we did have some issues, but I want to get your perspective, and I'll give you mine. Well, first, let's talk about the treatment selection process, and along with that, let's talk about where we were financially. Let's talk about the financial situation first, and then we can talk about the treatment process. So, because when I was initially diagnosed, I don't know, I know I didn't have health care, but was I working at the time? I don't remember. Or was I consulting at the time? I don't remember having insurance, basically.
At that time, you were freelancing. You were an independent contractor. And no, we did not have health insurance, or you did not have health insurance at that time, the time that you were diagnosed, which was an issue.
And when I remember looking at the various treatments. One was a proton therapy treatment, and you went with me down to Jacksonville. It was also taped because it was a part of the documentary, kind of my selection process. I waited for almost a year before I made the decision, because my case was the cancer was self-contained in the prostate, so I could do that what is it? Surveillance? Not surveillance. How do you?
Watch and wait is the layman's term for
Yeah,
it.
yeah. You're
Yes.
right. You got to help me, because we help each other in our golden years.
Yes, watch and wait.
Yeah. So anyway, I watched and I waited, but in the meantime, I went around the country and we did different places. But I do remember proton therapy being very expensive, and really we weren't able to afford it. Do you remember when I did decide to go with the seed implant? Because at the time they were going to give me a deal and we're going to work out something financially. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I remember us praying a lot for the Lord to show us what the best route to take was, what the best choice would be. I don't remember worrying a lot about it. And perhaps you worried and you hid that from me because, naturally I'm a worrier and I bounce off of you when it comes to worry. But I did not worry about how we were going to pay for treatment. Maybe you worried and didn't want me to know. I'm sure it was an incredible stress on you. And even a greater stress having to keep that from me. But I remember us praying a lot. And I really felt like whatever we needed, whatever the best choice was going to be, that somehow we would be able to do what we needed to do to put forth the efforts to save your life. But I do remember the deal with the seeds and it falling through and the whole 9 yards of that at the last minute, once you decided that maybe you were going to do that, have the seed implants, and then almost in real time, it was reneged. The offer, the deal was not acknowledged. Nobody knew what you were talking about. I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty wild. But I think that, to your point, we prayed a lot about it, and the seed implants probably that was just not the treatment for me. And then later on, and yeah, I didn't let you know because I was really stressing over how we are going to pay for it. I know Regina, my sister, your sister-in-law, actually paid for the first biopsy for me to go because I was what they call the infamous self-pay. There was also not as many options for financial assistance as there are now. I noticed in my research there are a number of different places and organizations that are kind of providing this mutual aid to try to help with the cost and working with the provider. For me, it was like, oh, okay, so, what now? And then, for a lot of men, there is a tendency to kind of go with what your urologist does. Now, your urologist will give you all of the options, and that's what they're supposed to do. But there are some that specialize in different things. Some specialize maybe in robotic surgery. Some might specialize in the seeds. There's a tendency, and you remember, there's a tendency to kind of lean a little bit towards what your urologist is kind of known for. But I will say, before you do that, to really look around and to really objectively check out all of the different options for treatment and then get the full information so you can sit down. Do you remember when we sat down? What was that like? We were at the table. I think we even filmed that about the selection process for treatment.
I remember seeing the footage, but I don't remember exactly what I felt at that time. But I was going to say, when the seed implant deal fell through, I didn't worry because, as I stated, I figured, well, maybe that's not the treatment that you're supposed to have. I'd like to say what I do remember, though. I do remember, and I may be jumping a little ahead, I do remember when, at that time, even people with health insurance, there were all kinds of ways that you may not have been able to get treatment even if you had health insurance at that time, because at that time, that was including pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, I remember that. That was the big issue. Yeah, that we had to work through. And then it wasn't Obamacare at the time, but I do remember the pre-existing condition did not come into play when I did decide on treatment, which was great. And thankfully, I got a full-time job. And to your point, they covered it. They covered whatever treatment I decided to get, making the treatment a lot more affordable than we had in the past. But I remember us sitting in a little place downtown and we had all the brochures. And well, first of all, let me ask you this. Do you think we decided together, or do you think you let me decide and then kind of went with it?
I don't remember, but what I can say is, knowing my personality, I probably made my decision and let you think it was your decision, hoping that's what you chose, because I'm a very pragmatic person. And my thing would have been to just take it out. If it's causing me issue, take it out. That's just the kind of person I am. And so I don't remember whether you made that decision stand alone on your own, or whether I was just kind of willing you to make the decision to just have it removed.
I think it was a little of both, but to be honest with you, because taking it out was like at the bottom of my list, just because I didn't want to wear a catheter for a week and all. Matter of fact, that's a good segue into the fact that I did make that decision based on, you're kind of pushing me a little bit, maybe after surgery. There were some physical changes. Let's talk about that first week, because I don't think I didn't realize how, I won't say incapacitated, but I was kind of moving a little slow, and I had a catheter. And what was that like for you after the surgery?
The first week was tough. There's no other way to put it. You had a catheter. You couldn't really move around or get up and do a whole lot for yourself. I had to empty the catheter bucket or pan or whatever you want to call it. And I mean, there was times when it leaked and it didn't. I don't know. It was tough. I would just say it was a tough first week. But as I had stated earlier, I was committed to do whatever I had to do, but it was tough. It was tough, number one, to see you incapacitated in that way, and tough on me having the responsibility of not only feeding you and making sure you got medication on time and all of the things that go along with caregiving, but also having to service the catheter. That was tough.
Yeah. Did you think you had to deal with any changes in my personality or changing in my attitude? Did you notice any of that, dealing with the physical, but also the kind of mental part. What was that like? Because I don't remember that. I don't remember. I just remember, hey, it's going through it, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't like myself for the most part.
You were not yourself. You were frustrated because you were incapacitated and you were not accustomed to dealing with being incapacitated and having to depend on someone else for things of such a personal nature. Even me. I mean, you and I, we down, but yes, your personality, you were a little short and frustrated, and you weren't yourself because you weren't feeling like yourself and you couldn't do for yourself like you're so used to doing. So yes, there was some rocky time with your emotions were all over the place. I mean, it was tough.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry about that. I know I never thought about it, but I was probably a lousy patient. I do remember that. I am anyway.
You were and continue to be a terrible
Yeah.
patient.
So we get through it, and now I think probably coming to the one area that a lot of people don't talk about, and that is the sexual relationship and the challenges. I guess we can talk about, because to be honest with you, before the operation, I had no issues with anything. I didn't need Viagra. I didn't need it. I mean, we had a pretty healthy relationship. When you have your prostate removed, they do spare the nerves and the blood vessels that help you to have an erection, and hopefully things kind of start working after a time. I spoke to one guy and he was like, nothing happened for months. And then one day, boom, it was just there, and I was like, wow. And so you kind of have that anticipation, but there were some challenges, right? When we first, after it was okay for us to kind of engage in sexual relationships again, there was a sexual relation, not relationships. Let me get
Let's
that
clear
straight.
that up.
Let me clear that up right now. I don't want that to be a meme or somebody go, what? Uh, but so, do you want to let's talk about that? I mean, from your perspective, because I can tell you, I was a little disappointed. I was hoping that things would change over time, but that's something that we had to deal with, right? I mean, I had ED, and that's kind of the way it's been, right, for the most part.
Well, let me just say in brutal honesty, there were changes. Because we had had such a healthy sex life prior to you having surgery, one part of me probably felt like I didn't want to deal with you having prostate cancer because I knew that it meant that would change. But when it did change, because our foundation was so strong, because we had already had many years together and where I was thoroughly satisfied, I had no doubt that even though I knew it would change, it would be different, but I had faith that it would still be satisfying. And so, yes, it did change. You came out of it with erectile dysfunction. And I mean, over a period of time, we figured out how to deal with that in a way where we resumed relations, but it was still, it was different.
Yeah, I think we had to find kind of what worked and what satisfied us both. I think the good thing about the surgery was that I still had feelings, I still climaxed, if you will, but, there's nothing there. But I mean, I still had that. That was still a part of it. The ED was a big part. And I remember we went through several different things before. I know I hear all of these ads now about different types of pills and mixed. I was listening to one walking the dog, it's the active ingredient in Viagra and zinc, so, but also there are these places that I guess do this ultrasound, not ultrasound, but it's some kind of radio, I don't know, waves. And anyway, so there's a lot more, but back then there wasn't a lot. But do you remember we went to that one guy with the vacuum? Do you
Yes.
remember?
I'm sorry. I remember the vacuum. Yes.
So yeah, and then let me just preface this by saying that I think that if surgeons do surgery, right? and they're great at it. I mean, I had a wonderful surgeon that did the robotic surgery and had, I don't know, 100, 800 or whatever of surgeries under his belt. So he was the person in town to do this. But I do feel that post-operative, when you do have issues and you have your follow-ups, the follow-up is more make sure that the surgery and everything is all right, the cancer's gone, that kind of thing. But I think really, and I'm just going to say this is my opinion, that to seek out a urologist that really specializes in this area, I think is important. I mean, we were given the guy upstairs in the men's center or whatever, and he gave us the vacuum thing that it's like you put it on and it supposedly sucks the blood into your penis and everything's hunky-dory. But it was probably a better vacuum cleaner than than it was solving erectile dysfunction. But anyway, but we tried that. I remember another urologist that really did specialize, because this was the first time that I went to a urologist and they gave me an injection, and the injections were something that would work, but there were some side effects. First of all, you had to inject yourself in your penis, that's interesting. But it did work. And the other part was that until you got that injection right, it could sometimes be a long time before things settle down. So it got to be painful. But this doctor injected me and then did kind of an ultrasound to see where the blood flow was and wasn't. And in his estimate, I guess I was about 30%. So 70% of what I had before was not there. And nobody had ever told me that before. Everybody sort of let me know that things were going to be okay. Sooner or later, you'll get back to kind of where you were. And that was, hopeful thinking. And I get it. But that was the first time I kind of really knew what was going on. And then we did some treatments and some other things that he did around getting the blood flow back. Some of it kind of worked. But I will say that at least that particular doctor was focused on that part of where I was in my recovery. And that's so important. There's so many things out there now, guys. So don't let that stop you from being alive. Because what'd you say, Anita, about life over
libido?
Yeah, because whatever you thought you did before, you sure enough ain't gonna be able to do it if you're not here. I think for us, we found a way to both be satisfied. It wasn't the same, it was different, but the results, right, are still the same. Now, tell me if I'm wrong. So
The results are the same. This is many years later, 12, 13 years later. I'll have to say in the beginning, there were some things that I missed. It required intentionality in the beginning. Doesn't so much now, but in the beginning it did. There were some things I missed and mourned the death of. And it was very difficult for me to tell whether or not you were satisfied, because the obvious sign of a man being excited is an erection, right? And so when you lose that, how do you gauge how it's going, what you're doing? Is it working, right? Did you do it right? Okay. Without an erection, it's very difficult to judge that with a man. So without the erection, there were some times where I didn't know, you could say yes, it was good, but I didn't have that outward sign to confirm that you were still engaged in that way. And to be quite honest with you, I missed that outward sign. That was one of the things I missed.
yeah, well, when I said I did, I did. But yeah, I think that was, it's funny that you said that you sort of mourned that loss. And how long was it before you kind of felt like we had found that groove, but differently?
I don't remember at what point. Like I said, it's been years. It took some time. Once we resumed sexual relations, it worked. We were both satisfied, but it did take some time before it was effortless again, before it felt totally spontaneous and normal. It took some time. For quite some time, I missed the feeling of, not necessarily as it relates to having sexual intercourse, but just on a daily basis, the natural bodily function of you having an erection. First thing in the morning, right? That's what a man does. A man has an erection, and all things of that nature that may not have been so much related to sexual intercourse, but related to you or being a man and having the normal functions of a man. I did miss. I missed for quite some time. Yes.
So, what would you tell women or significant others who may be experiencing this or who may be afraid that once their person goes through this, that's going to maybe be a deal breaker? What would you tell women to move on and to work through this, or other significant others? Yeah.
Well, I would have to say that love, I mean, if you love somebody and you rather have them here than not, then I won't say it's a small thing, but it won't be the most important thing. What's most important is that, as I said, you choose life over libido. Because I knew for me, I would rather have you here than to not. And I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that I didn't want anybody else. And that's the decision only the two people can make. So if you're at that point, then you decide that it's more important to save your life, your spouse's life or your significant other's life, than it is to you decide that maybe you have to step out of your comfort zone and be willing to do that and find other and new ways to relate to one another sexually. I mean, there are all kinds of ways, and things can happen on either side that prevent what you're used to. I mean, life changes. That is a given fact. That is the only constant. And even if without prostate cancer, eventually two people will change. If they decide to be together and stay together and age together, there will be changes. So I don't know. You just have to make a decision that the changes are not more valuable than the two of you remaining together.
Yeah. And that's extremely important. And, for us, it just kind of evolved because we never stopped loving one another. And so it was just, making adjustments. Things happen with you on your end. And as we get older, we both have to make adjustments. But I think, the most important thing is that we got through it together. And also just being honest and open and talking about it. I know some men and women too don't just really want to even discuss this particular issue. If you're awkward about it, after you get over it, and really sit down and also determine what kind of excites your partner and satisfies your partner, and then you kind of work through it. And of course, as you mentioned, there's so many other things, and we're going to do an episode on that, several episodes. We're going to have some of the experts on to talk about what's new, what's different, what you can do. I may even try some of their suggestions and see what happens. I don't think I'll be going back to the vacuum though. That's probably not. It's probably not on the list. But yeah, and then we'll be talking to other men who have gone through it, and some. It's funny because when you talk to a guy who's gone through this, I'm telling you, almost 100%. Everybody say, "Oh yeah, man, I'm back. I'm back." I'm good. I'm good. And I will say one thing that Ralph told me about going through this process is, and I'm sure there may be some out there, a small percentage that are 100%, and it was like boom, nothing happened. He said, but going through this, you are not ever going to be 100%. You might be 90, you might be 80, but it changes. You're going to change. There is something in your body that now is not there or is not functioning anymore. So there's going to be some change. And I think to be honest about it, to understand that, but again, not to let that, if you go into it knowing, hey, there are going to be some changes, but I'm going to be here because I will tell you, those that are listening, that men die every day from prostate cancer. Don't be fooled and think that because you're okay and there are no symptoms, that they die every day. And we've had some famous people pass away from prostate cancer just recently. So it is important. It is cancer. So that being said, deal with that first. And then there are things that you can do, and also make sure that your doc is sensitive to it and knows kind of the new stuff and what's going on and can align where you are with things that are out there to help. So that's my soapbox. But speaking of this being cancer, whenever you have it, there is a possibility of it returning. And so I think I may have mentioned this on the first episode, but I want to get your perspective because just recently, after 12 months, or 12 years rather, being cancer free, I was diagnosed with a reoccurrence. And basically, it was that my PSA, which should be undetectable because I don't have a prostate, if it starts to rise, and it's not going to be 100, it's not going to be 1 or 2, and it will if you don't take care of it, but because I every year getting my PSA checked in my annual, it started kind of creeping up. So after a certain point, I think 0.25, that is the diagnosis of reoccurrence, and then it kind of went up to 0.41 before treatment. But I don't even remember when I told you that. I don't know if I told you it was a possibility or did I tell you it was. And we were in and talked about how you felt when I said to you, I was saying a biochemical reoccurrence. That's what they call it, but it is prostate cancer again. So how did you feel about that after 12 years?
I don't remember how I felt, Reggie. I don't remember how you told me or when you told me. I just remember, I think I was worried somewhat, but because we had already lived through it once and you had had 12 years cancer free, I don't think I was as taken aback as I was when you got your initial diagnosis. Because we communicate so openly, and I think I neglected to say in our last exchange how important it is to communicate. That is what makes things work between two people. You have to communicate your feelings, your thoughts, because we're so close and we communicate on that level. I really wasn't worried. I was somewhat worried, but I just felt like it would be okay. Whatever you had to do, we would do it. I knew that. And so whatever they said you needed to do to not be sick, I said, okay, what's next? What do we got to do? Let's do it. I was committed to doing it.
And that was the process that I didn't use before that I was able to use, which is radiation because I had it removed. But I instead of doing photon radiation, I did proton radiation here at the Emory Proton Center in Atlanta, which is probably about 8 years old, maybe. Before, when we were looking at it for my initial treatment, the closest one was in Jacksonville, but we were blessed to have it right here. And so going through that process, 37 consecutive days, not including weekends, because we got the weekends off, but every day going down, braving the traffic. So one time I went in my pajamas because it was like 10:30 at night. And what has that been like going through that process? Because that's different than having it removed, and you got to deal with at least the initial treatment and the after effects for a week or two. And then you're on the road to recovery. This is something that was almost over a month that we had to do that. So what was that experience like for you?
I will say that when I heard that you had to have 37 consecutive radiation treatments, that did frighten me because I have a little experience in my family with cancer and radiation. And I really didn't understand fully the difference between photon and proton radiation. That really scared me because I watched my mother go through the photon, I believe it is, old-fashioned radiation treatments and how that ravished and wrecked my mother. And so once I understood that the proton therapy was not quite as debilitating as photon therapy, then I took kind of a wait and see stance on it. Having you have 37 consecutive, with the weekends off, treatments in a row was excruciating in terms of supporting you. It was a roller coaster ride of times that you were to show up to have the appointment times varied. There were times when you were weak, and I don't know. It was a challenge to work through this time because of the late nights. There was appointments at 11 p.m. and sometimes we didn't get home till midnight. And I'm due on the clock at 7 a.m. And then having to try to cook and feed you. There was a constant series of making sure you had enough water and that you were hydrated enough, that your bladder was full enough, but not too full, that your rectum was empty, and that you had eaten, food to help you combat cancer. I mean, that was a lot. And then combined with the fact that, you got time that you can take for sick leave for family, but the process of family medical leave is so user unfriendly until it just almost made you want to throw your hands up and say it's not even worth it, right? So it was a lot. It was a lot. And I was glad. I was very happy to see it come to an end when you had that 37th treatment and you were still standing, albeit weakened. You were still there. And so I was glad when it was over.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but we got through it and kind of waiting to see what the results are going to be. Prognosis is pretty good because it was very early, but I did remember when I said that, when things are outside the prostate, then it could get a little dicey. And so in this case, they were treating the prostate bed because that's where normally any kind of residual issues happen. But it's not a guarantee. It's not 100%. These are molecules that are in your body. So they take I won't say shotgun approach, but they do cover a large area in hopes of eradicating it. So I feel good about it. So we'll get to do that, and I'll be able to reveal what happens to everybody on social media and on the show and everything. So, and I thank everybody for all the prayers, and I thank you, Anita, for being there for me and with me, because you were there every night. I mean, some people, I remember some guys that come in by themselves, and it was just a wonderful thing to have you, there every night for me. And that helped me get through it. It really did.
Can I say a word about that? So I always like to encourage anybody I come in contact with to be your own advocate. Oftentimes, people who look like me don't get the consideration as other people to be able to have the space to support family, to get the support and to give the support to loved ones that's required when there's a cancer, when caregiving is involved. You saw guys that came in alone, but they all looked like me. All of the people that did not look like me were accompanied by spouses. And so it becomes doubly difficult when a doctor sees you and says something like, oh, you don't need to accompany them every single time. And you're sitting there saying, why wouldn't I need to accompany him? He won't be able to be his usual self. There'll be times when he can't do for himself what he normally would. Why would you think that I don't have to be there to support him? And then it really stings when you see everybody else's spouse there, right? To support them. And so it just feels I'm just saying that to say, don't accept somebody's idea of what you and your family needs for support. Always advocate. You got to advocate for yourself and your family based on what you know is required to keep your family healthy and strong and together. That was a real challenge for me.
Yeah, and to your point, there are always things on the peripheral that you got to deal with in going through this. Any parting words that you have? I mean, we may do another session later on with you, and maybe bring in a doctor and talk about some other things. But any parting words for particularly those couples and other significant others that are kind of supporting their person through this?
Yes, don't tuck your tail and run. Deal with it. Talk about it. Address it. Do what you can to extend the life of your loved one or yourself. Don't give up and don't feel as though it's insurmountable. Get checked, seek help, communicate with each other and with people who know about what you're going through. I guess my advice would be just to deal with it. I mean, it's not going anywhere, and you not dealing with it is not going to change that. So in a nutshell, choose life over libido and deal with it, so that you can have longer and more fruitful years together.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think for men can be pretty stubborn. And I know one situation where the wife watched this, heard about this project, and convinced her husband, what is your PSA? He didn't know. He's like, I don't know. And so they got it and started monitoring and found out it was high. And then he ended up having prostate cancer. But he had no idea. And so I know that word nagging kind of gets in there sometimes, but I'm telling you, listen to your significant other and take the opportunity at least to know this number, because as Anita mentioned, we want you around for a long time. So Anita, thank you for being brave and transparent enough to share our story for the benefit of other couples. I want you to know I love you, and don't worry, I'll get to the dishes after I walk the dog. Just some more housekeeping before we close the show. So, but thank you, Anita, and I will see you in a bit.
All right.
So I want to thank Anita again. Our producer, Danny, will be posting some of the great resource links in our show notes. You can also go to our website, ifyouaremybrodherspodcast.com. That's ifyouaremybrodherspodcast.com to listen to other episodes. All of our episodes are archived on the website. Also on the website, you can leave us a written or voice message. And of course, you can follow us on social media. I know we're on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn as well. Speaking of that, please follow us, subscribe, and share. And visit the website for the project, If You Are My Brothers. It talks about the documentary. It talks about our community engagement efforts and some other things that we're doing. We want you to definitely support us if you can. There are a number of ways. You can visit our website at ifyouaremybrothers.org. You can mail us a check. But whatever you can do to support what we're trying to do, not just through this podcast, but also through our documentary and our community engagement. We're here for one thing, and that is to really get the word out and get the awareness out. Because with so many things happening on the healthcare landscape today, so many things are going away, it is so important for us, as Anita said, to be your own advocate and to stay on top of these things and to get this thing taken care of early. Don't wait, don't procrastinate. This is something that if caught early, one, it'll save your life. Two, it won't be as expensive as if you had to go through a whole lot of other procedures. And three, you'll be around for your family. You'll be around for your loved ones. And so we're just here to get the word out. Coming up on other episodes, we'll have some other folk that have gone through this, different stages, different treatments. So you can get really a feel for talking, communicating with other men who have gone through this. We'll have healthcare professionals as well. We'll talk about research and new things that are on the horizon in dealing with prostate cancer. So if you know someone that has prostate cancer or maybe going through it, or even a survivor, survivorship is important. And this show is a lot about survivorship. Definitely share and get the word out, and we appreciate that. We want to say special thanks to our producer, Danny Garcia Pozo, and our digital media coordinator, Jordy Seraphin. We got Jordy and we got Danny. It's great. And to Zach Reynolds at Borkhouse Productions for our opening. We want to thank you so much for being a part of this effort. And If You Are My Brothers, by the way, is a project of Straight Street Media, which is a nonprofit media organization, opening eyes to a new vision. That is our theme. That is our slogan. And you can learn more about Straight Street Media at straightstreetmedia.org. So until next time, please share this podcast with your loved ones and friends, because if you are my brothers, we will get through this together. See you next time. Peace.